Teachers who've given up on a student. What did they do for you to not care anymore, and do you know how they turned out? I have given up on one student, and it was when it began to impact on the learning of the rest of the class. This kid was a behavioral nightmare. I worked with the headmaster to get him anger management referrals, mental health evaluations, involved social services to see what was going on at home, etc. His family wasn't on board and accused me of just not being nice enough to him. Day after day he still continued to throw things at me, scream at me, pound his head against the floor, attack other class members, etc. It reached a point where I worked out that he ruined about 30-60 minutes of class time per day, and I had enough. I stopped trying different tactics with him and just had him removed every time he even looked like he was about to kick off. It was really frustrating because his schoolwork was well below average, and I knew it would stay that way unless he was able to remain in class and benefit from the teaching. It still bothers me that I wasn't able to reach him. I don't think he was a lost cause, but I don't really think any 9-year-old is a lost cause. I think it was just more than I could deal with at that time. As for how he turned out, I don't know. He switched schools the next year. It was his first and only year at my school, so I imagine he jumps around a lot. I'm honestly surprised he never ended up in the special ed class. When I was in elementary school, that's where those kinds of kids went. I had seen what it was like in that room. It was kind of crazy. I remember when I had to stop by the room and saw a student throw her desk. He pushed a girl down a flight of stairs because she wouldn't go out with him. He thought everyone overreacted. She was an athlete prior to the incident. She had 4 spinal surgeries and will never regain full mobility and will always have some pain. He was completely unrepentant and felt completely justified because she had rejected his advances. He was in butthole. He was in butthole prior to this incident, but this was the event that pushed me over the edge from your jerk. But I'm going to try and help you learn something to frick you and fail. I didn't intentionally fail him. He was able to accomplish that with alarming ease all by himself. It was a college student. She had a lot promise, but was really lazy, I think. I explained plagiarism the first day of class. Covered it again before their first paper was due. A few people still submitted plagiarized works. You can tell it was mostly because they don't understand citing and it wasn't malicious. I review it again and things are great. Other than this one girl, she submits a second assignment and it's worse than the first. She asks how I know. Well, it was obvious because her writing was okay, but the plagiarized bits were great. So I Google those bits and easily find the originals. Third assignment. Does it again. I have to escalate. I offered her one-on-one help. I reminded her prior. I pointed her to resources. I suggested she attend a writing clinic. She just kept trying to make the plagiarized bits sound more like her than somebody else. I had to fail her. She appealed. I submitted everything about the situation. She lost her appeal. There comes a point in every single year when I have to give up on a student or students. It's the 4th quarter and I have tried every single thing I can think of and more to inspire or help them, and they refuse. I have to let them go. I have to shift my focus on the other 130 plus kids who are still working. The thing is that I do care. Very much. I never stop caring. I carry those few failures around in my heart year after year. Long after I forget the names of the thousands of students I have succeeded with, I can tell you everything about the ones I lost. I care, but sometimes, it isn't the best use of my time. I could neglect 149 students to provide that one student with all the tutoring and home contacts and extra help, and chances are, she will still fail the class and get suspended for fighting, because she doesn't yet want to get help, and won't use it. Or I could give my best to all of my students, sadly accept that this student isn't yet interested in help, and try to let her know that, when she wants it, I'll be available. I gave up on a student after the following. He failed the first quarter, badly. I offered him a re-evaluation of his grade. He and his mother signed a contract agreeing to the terms. Turn in all missed work from Q1. Attend extra help regularly. Maintain a passing grade for Q2. No lateness or unexcused absences in Q2. That sort of thing. He fulfilled exactly 0 of the requirements. He's not a bad kid. but the effort I was putting into his interests was wasted. I have too many other students who need my attention to waste time on someone like that. I believe in second chances. I even believe in third chances. But at some point, if you're inclined to shoot yourself in the foot, then I'm inclined to let you. I love that last sentence. Applicable in so many situations. I taught freshman English classes for a few years. The student that comes to mind was incredibly bright and had a real penchant for writing. He was also a bit apathetic and didn't turn in all of his work on time, but was still smarter than several of the kids in that class. He showed up to class irregularly and often would cite very personal reasons for missing class, usually involving his girlfriend breaking up with him. I remember once sitting him down and having a very in-depth conversation about his life, including his mental health issues. The thing that really struck me was how he was surprised I even gave a crap about him or his life. For me, I just saw a troubled kid who had a lot of potential. When he left class, I truly believed he'd turn it around and make up his missed work and show up every day. He showed up a couple more times and didn't come back. I sometimes regret not reaching out to him again, but I had other students to worry about and I already felt like I'd done enough at the time. I do wonder about him sometimes and what he's up to. You didn't really give up on him. My mom was a teacher, and she told me this story about a kid who would always put stupid comments on questions that he didn't know on tests and quizzes. The thing is, he never studied, so he never knew any of the answers. Her favorite comment was when the question was what was the farming area in villages that was for the poor to farm. He said, the median of the highway. At the beginning of the school year, I was told I was going to have an emotionally disabled child in my 5th grade class. The labeling of kids bothered me a lot, but this one really took the cake and tea. Greatly upset me. As I got to know him, I found the problem to be anger due to a lack of structure and commitment from those around him. His dad abused his mom early in his life, then dad left not long after. He says he never remembers his dad being around. Since then, his mom worked constantly, trying to find a male figure to replace my student's father. Suffice to say, it was unsuccessful, which led my student to have severe trust issues. By the time he was in my class, his mom worked in a town 45 minutes away while he attended school locally, with no one else around. If he was sick, upset, or all around having a bad day, he was stuck. Due to his mom's schedule, she didn't let him stay home sick. This led to incredible outbursts of anger on anyone who would cross his path, including me. This child would scream and degrade, but worst of all, he got physical. When it was with me, I'd do my best to de-escalate, but it often had no effect. This kid wasn't emotionally disabled, he was emotionally neglected. He'd physically escalate with other kids, but my breaking point was when he choked another student at recess. I caught him on top of a play structure with his hands around another student's neck. The other student was deep red from oxygen deprivation and fear. The kicker was that this kid was his only friend at school. Soon thereafter, I had a conference with the mom. Threatening expulsion was the only way to have her in, and she explained to me that I wasn't doing enough to discipline the other kids to keep her son calm. I gave my resignation notice days later and left within a month. I don't know how he turned out. Thinking about it makes me sad. Truthfully, I wish I would have done more some days. Then I realize I went far above and beyond what I should have. I let one of my own students get choked. It never should have gotten that far. All I know is that he's 15 now, and I hope that he's doing well. Hep, sounds like a child my brother went to elementary school with. The boy attempted to choke him to death one day. Not the same kid though. This kid grew up to be quite the criminal, and is currently doing life plus 270 years. Worked for the first time as a learning support assistant at a high school last year, and one of the first kids I worked was a year 7 kid, and his whole attitude was just so horrible. He was such a control freak and simply would not compromise for anything. He was incredibly rude to me, and since this was my first job in a school, almost every lesson with him was a horrible experience. Plus he also hit his girlfriend, though I am not sure why. In the end I just gave up, which was a shame because he was a smart kid. The other assistants had similar issues with him and they kinda gave up too. One actually said if he were her son, she would have strangled him at birth, and she had a lot more experience working with difficult kids. For a second, I read that as a 7-year-old, I was wondering why he had a girlfriend. I had an excellent student who was recently killed in a hit and run about a year after the class. This understandably upset me. As I was walking around campus on other business, I was contemplating why it always seems to happen to the good ones, and I was concluding that maybe it's just because we remember the good ones better and take notice when bad things happen. But at that moment I was cutting through the student union building and saw another student from that section. One of the slackers who I wrote off and had failed, who had barely attended class and who had submitted garbage work. She was playing guitar in front of an audience, and she was amazing. What I learned at that moment is that we don't see everything about our students in the keyhole view of their lives that we get in the classroom. I did my job by failing her, and I'd fail that kind of work again, and I have. But to write her off was wrong, because our students are people too, and they have their own lives and interests. They have their own good days and bad days. We don't always see them at their best. So aside from horror stories like some of the violence narrated in this thread, I try to not write people off anymore. I can accept that maybe I don't have too much to offer to someone, because positive influence is not something that can be forced. I also accept that sometimes the best thing for students can be to fail them and to let them see the consequences of their inaction. But that's not the same thing as giving up on them. I taught college, so I don't know if it applies as well. I gave up on a lot of students in my time. A whole lot. Probably more than not, honestly. I taught 3D graphics, which was a credit for game design. So there was a lot of misconceptions of I play games, therefore I make games. Generally, if a student stopped showing up, I gave up on them. That goes without saying. I had a mental 3-strike system. There were a few things that got you strikes. 1. Trying to outsmart the instructor for a free good grade. Crap like turning in empty files hoping I don't actually grade crap. Turning in past projects. Or straight up cheating. The good old fashioned I was in class. You must not have seen me when attendance comes into play. State college. Can't pass if you miss too much school. 2. Freaking around in class and complaining about my teaching skills. Your crap face was on Facebook during the lecture. I warned you it was important. You then went right back to Facebook. You're lost equid. 3. Lack of motivation. This is a lot less obvious, but you can really tell when a student is trying, being motivated and improving. It really shows when a student never practices or tries new things. Sounds terrible, but I won't spend time on you if you won't spend time on the class. I have never pawned off a student for the next teacher to deal with. Mainly because I was the next teacher. Pass or fail, I get them again. I had very strong morals with grading. Those got me in a bit of hot water, because apparently you are supposed to give a student a C just so we can fluff up our graduation numbers. I said frick that and quit teaching. Last thing I need is a dude who can't optimize a sphere trying to use topo tools to optimize a sculpt. Game design is really dang hard, especially shaders. Jesus frick. Just read a paper on a recent shading technique. I'm a swimming instructor. I've given up on a few kids. Usually because they don't listen to me or other teachers, or just can't seem to do basic things like kick faster. Most of them eventually figure it out after a few weeks. So when that happens I can focus more time into developing proper technique instead of just letting them swim up and down the small lane. But there is this one boy I teach who has a mental disability. He can do one thing at a time, like kick from point A to B just holding his breath. But as soon as I try and get him to do 2 things at once, not happening. Like for instance, when I'm showing him how to breathe he'll kick for a little bit, stop kicking, lift his head up, put his head back in and struggle the rest to the end. If I try to correct him it's often met with harsh resistance. There are 3 other children in this class, so some weeks I just have to give up on trying to teach him anything and just focus on developing technique for the other kids. I'm a swimming instructor. I've given up on a few kids. My first thought after reading this opening was that you let them drown. I had a kid admit to stealing 3 of my calculators. He also urinated in my trash can. It still gives me chills to think about the look he always had in his eyes. He is the only person I've ever met who I felt just belongs in prison. I know exactly what you're talking about. I had one like that too. just completely devoid of any emotion, and you could see it in his eyes. Almost certainly a sociopath, but nobody would do anything about it. I'm pretty sure the principal and I caught him trying to rape a girl behind the school once. He was 12. If he doesn't one day go to jail for murder, I will be shocked. I'm a rowing coach for a high school and I have only given up on one kid. I teach novices primarily because I believe in order to have a good varsity team you need a stellar novice team. All rowers are considered novice for their first year and are varsity after that. This one kid was a behavioral disaster. He would pants other kids, would talk back to me on land, before we even put boats in water, wouldn't do workouts. One of the major concerns in rowing is safety, for the obvious reason that if something goes wrong a kid can drown, and scarily coaches too. And when you drown I've been told you can die. My basic rule is if I cannot trust you on land, I will not put you on a boat. Although it's near impossible to flip an 8-person boat, one dumb butt action can do it, and I am never willing to risk the other 8 people in the boat. 7 rowers, 1 coxswain. He stayed on the team for his whole novice year. The first season I tried to get him to understand why he was never boated and tried to adjust his behavior by positive reinforcement. Second semester I had to suspend him for a week when on a run. Him and another kid went out of my sight on a 4-mile loop, went to get ice cream instead of running. His mom emailed me asking me why he was suspended for what he told her was just walking, to which I replied in a lengthy and very professional email about his behavior, and she was completely understanding. Just an overall great parent. He eventually didn't return the second year, and to be honest I was more upset that I lost a great parent than the rower. You don't really give up. You say, if you're unwilling to learn, I can't help you. If you are willing, nothing can stop you. The kids who really need the reality check, I tell them to 1. Drop out. 2. Drop out and go to the local JC since apparently you're good to go. 3. Pass my class. 4. I'll see you next year or at summer school. I tell them they'll get it when they don't get to walk across the stage. I don't give up. They do. I had a teacher in high school tell me to drop out. I was so offended at his lack of concern with me that I pulled my crap together and passed the class. I've never completely given up on a student. I have given up on certain days with them, but that is bound to happen. A kid calls me a butthole. I'm not going to concern myself with him or her for the rest of the day. If that kid asks me for help in a couple days, I help him or her. Emotional ups and downs are part of the job when you're dealing with adolescents. As an English intern in a high school, I have realized that there are some students that just won't perform. No matter how much you attempt to help them or show them different avenues, they have no ambition and do not want to succeed in your classroom because they do not care. They just want to meet the minimum so that they can graduate and get out of the prison. I realize that this is really cynical of me, but it is difficult to teach these students when they do not have any drive whatsoever. That being said, not everyone should be a scholar. It was at a university. I was his TA. He spent more class time staring at pictures of Zac Efron than paying attention in class. He submitted 1 page of gibberish for an essay. I provided a page of feedback, tips on how to improve argument, to solve simple grammar problems that were rampant, and really tried to encourage better work. I offered to go through it during my office hours and let him bounce ideas off me. For your information, if ever your instructor offers this, take it. It's basically like getting the answers to a test in advance. They won't write the essay for you, but your ideas will get better by getting the advice of the instructor, and because the instructor knows what you were thinking, they'll be more forgiving with those instances where your argument could be stronger. His next essay was worse. He received a lower grade, then went to the head instructor, who was not even close to the coddling kind, to complain about his grade. One look at it and she said, "You're right. It should have been a lower grade," and sent him packing. I will give almost any student all the opportunities they need to improve, but if they don't want the help and they're not going to try, then there's nothing I can do and won't waste my time anymore. But if they come back looking for help trying to improve, I would give them another chance. The only kids who deserve to be coddled in college are the ones that are really trying and actually give a frick. I once gave up on a student not because of him, but because of the other teachers. I was student teaching, and I had this one guy who loved openly challenging me in front of the whole class, 1-to-1 in small groups. He was actually a really nice guy, the kind of kid who reminded me of the people I hung out with in school. In class he was a freaking terror. Very rude. His grades were also terrible, though definitely not the worst in the class. Very bright guy, so that was confusing. I was in middle school, and my state does this thing where they use all the parapress to break students off into smaller groups for reading stuff. Every school I have ever worked at does this at his level. Because I'm regular ed, my group was mostly regular ed kids. I happened to have this guy in my group. We read aloud. When this guy was reading, I noticed that he pronounced things in like this beyond bizarre way when he read aloud. He spoke totally normally. It's been so many years, I can't remember exactly how he said things off, but it was weird. Even the other kids in the group made faces, and I jumped a couple kids a few times for making fun of him for it. Turns out, my best friend is dyslexic, and I knew one of the common hypotheses about the disease was that it had something to do with a failure to distinguish the different sounds in speech. I posed this to my host teacher. She looked at his record, said he was tested. He's not LD. Drop it. I wouldn't. She pointed out how we can't diagnose kids and it could be legal trouble. Okay, fine. Why not just work on some of the accommodations anyway? Nope. Drop it. His problem. He's lazy. Another teacher suggested we try and intervene with a sort of back to basics approach for his group. He wasn't the only problem in it. Nope. Host wouldn't play ball. It got to the point where I had to choose between pushing and flunking my teaching program or letting it go and graduating. Given how much I hate this freaking industry and all the balls things I see done that make it harder for kids to learn, I wish I'd freaking kept on him. But I couldn't. I felt like it wasn't worth throwing my life away for a kid who didn't want help. I thought by letting this one slide I could save others later, in my own classroom. Yeah, that's worked out really freaking well. Right before I graduated, he and I did reach an understanding, without me even trying. He had a personal connection to something in our history book, shared it with the class, and it was like a light bulb. His grades didn't really improve, but he was way less off. He realized I wasn't his enemy. I just wish I could have helped him read. I teach at a college, so the answer is, constantly. Every semester, I give up on a student. There are a few permutations of why, but it's usually a combination of infrequent class attendance or attending class and sitting there not taking notes or answering questions. Just sitting there with a blank desk, staring at me, completely blowing off homework and in-class assignments, bombing tests, rejecting requests for him to meet with me or the dean, repeated, flagrant plagiarism. The worst is giving up on kids who I may like but who simply aren't putting in the effort no matter how many heart-to-hearts I have. If you wonder why some teachers seem heartless, these kids are why. When you pour effort into someone and have him simply and deliberately blow it off, it makes you wonder why you keep doing it. We didn't all start this way. You made us this way. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.